A few weeks ago, I was interviewing a data engineer and I think I asked a very simple question. How do you do a unit testing for your data workloads? And there was a pause, and not because it's a question that was hard by itself, but because the candidate didn't know that testing frameworks even exists for this space. Not only for Fabric, but even for the data factories and for their Synapse. And that's not a personal failure, that's a gap in how we talk about the data platforms. Data engineers are not worse engineers or the software developers. They just often work in an environment where testing is not encouraged, and CI/CD and all of the DevOps practices, they mostly focused on the deployment in best case scenario and not on validation. And it ran successfully on their machine or in dev workspace is treated as a quality signal. But in platforms like Microsoft Fabric, we can do better. And if you don't test, then small changes can break silently things. Even if something was working in your dev environment, not necessarily that it is exactly the same in your QA environment and, God forbid, in prod environment. And pipelines, they can be successful while the logic itself may be faulty. So the pipeline will go through, everything is nice, but the logic for those pipelines is not exactly what you wanted to have. Maybe because of the input parameters or because of the configuration. Well, you have many different options there that why it can fail. And finally, the confidence in the platform from your stakeholders, it can erode over time if there would be failures and issues all the time just piling up and up and up. Then there would be questions, why are we going with Fabric in the first place? And if you can prove that everything is working fine ahead of time, even before the deployment, then it would, on contrary, it will build up the confidence in the platform. So Microsoft Fabric gives you notebooks as first-class artifacts, then it gives you pipelines for the orchestration, and finally, what is the most important and what makes everything possible is a Git-based workflows. And once you have that, unit testing becomes optional, and you can just grab all of that knowledge and good practices from DevOps and from the software development and introduce it into the Fabric workflows, and it will become the part of the software development lifecycle or data platform development lifecycle if you want. This is not about testing that every row in your data warehouse is exactly what you want to be, and it is not that you have to have coverage or something along those lines, but at least it's about validation of the assumptions and protecting your transformations and catching those small mistakes before they hit the production. So now let me be fully honest with you. I tried to implement this data testing framework from Microsoft on my local machine first, and I failed spectacularly, mostly because I haven't really read through the requirements and installed the .NET runtime version 10, not 8 as it was recommended, and I get this kind of exception, and I couldn't even install it locally. But then I decided to speed things up, especially that if you would work on Macs or if you would work on Linux machines, then the whole setup is a little bit easier. And the most important part is that I made it work in the DevOps pipeline, Azure DevOps pipeline, and that's what we are going to look. And in this video, I hope you will be able to follow some steps and avoid the same mistakes that I did while preparing for that demonstration. So, as I hinted at the beginning of the video, we are going to use a data factory testing framework, this one, from Microsoft. It is open source and it is a standalone test framework that allows us to write unit tests, so the tests that can be executed pretty much anywhere, and they don't require the Fabric itself or the Azure Data Factory or the Synapse, because this framework supports all three of those platforms, and test their pipelines explicitly, not notebooks, to make sure that they are doing what they are supposed to do in a unit testing fashion. This framework is a community supported, so you are not expected to have any sort of SLAs from Microsoft themselves, but the framework is actively developed and well, somewhat, but it is supported, and there are open pull requests, there are issues, so it's quite stable. So all good on the end, and we are not going to use something that is dead for a long time. And this framework was available for quite some time, and it would be nice if every data engineer would have an idea that this framework at least exists and includes that into their practices and day-to-day activities. So how to use it? In the getting started section, there is an installation and initialization of the framework section. And the first thing that is needed is to install the .NET runtime, but in my experience actually the SDK is required, or at least on my pipeline in Azure DevOps, the whole setup didn't really work with runtime and I had to change to the SDK. But that 8.0 is an important bit because I tried to use 10.0 and locally on my machine as well, and it didn't work. And then how to install the framework itself. It is available as a Python package, so over here, so as simple as just pip install Data Factory testing framework. To indicate what we are going to do, there is an example section, and under the Data Factory for the batch job, there is a pipeline or description of the pipeline in a JSON format that is being tested. So what I did, I copied this pipeline description. So there is a orchestration pipeline that is doing stuff, then doing more stuff, and a little bit more, and then it runs two of the sub pipelines. So that's why it is an orchestration one. And finally, it's doing even more stuff. What I did, I copied that whole thing into the test folder and then added a .platform file that would have a name of the pipeline, and finally the whole pipeline content is over here. And after that I finally added the test.py file that would be used to test the whole thing. It would be a PyTest style, and here we have to set up a test framework, and the most important bit, two of the most important parameters, is what is the framework type. So we have to select the fabric, and the second thing is where the fabric items are located. So it would be under the root folder of the our repository, and then /fabric. So over here. In here you can see that I have committed from my previous experiments, and you can check the previous videos to see what we were going to do with this one. We have a data pipeline, dev pipeline, data pipeline, then that new one, the test, and there is a lakehouse as well. The pipeline content over here, it is copy pasted from the repository, and the test is over here. Just as an example, we can search for the copy and see that there is a unit test that covers the copy output files activity. So once again, from this description, it would be over here. Now, how that whole thing is added to the pipeline? Pretty simple. I added it into my existing deployment pipeline, and it would be a gate, or it could be used as a pre-commit hook. So this pipeline only as this bit of it can be executed for every commit, and if this pipeline fails, then the whole pull request should not be accepted into the main branch or whatever other branches that you might have, or at the very least those steps. So pretty much this one would be executed before you deploy using the Fabric CI/CD package. What I'm doing in that pipeline is first, as I said, that we are going to install the SDK version of the .NET Runtime, version 8.x, so it would be installing something like version 22. And after that, in a single bash script, we are going to use that pip install to install the Data Factory testing framework itself and the PyTest to run the tests. After that, let's execute the test using the PyTest, and the final thing is if the exit code of this PyTest is non-zero, so if it fails, then we want to fail the whole step, and therefore the whole pipeline would be failing. So now let's jump to the Azure DevOps itself, and here you can see a couple of my experiments with all of those greens that are not really green, where I was trying to run something and it was failing actually. So I was doing stuff, and here it was just a test to be able to install the Data Factory testing framework itself, but somewhere something like this, I was testing it even more, and everything looks good, but there was this pesky exception that no module named Microsoft Azure is found, so that's why I changed from the runtime to SDK to have this available. But all of that is covered pretty much in my pipeline, and what I currently have is this one was the last successful one. So this execution was that I run 11 tests altogether from my file, and in here I have, well, you can trust me that there are 11 tests that are doing things, and all of them they were successful. Then I decided to see what will happen if we are going to test it in a wrong way, or if the pipeline is doing something that is not expected. So that was the green version of the test, and this one, so when we are setting that is activity returning a not delete, and for sure the not delete method, so it will fail from the pipeline because pipeline has a different idea what is right, and that is my failing test, like this one. So first of all, we have a message that would help to understand what is going on, and then in the run pipeline we have delete, but it was expecting not delete, so those two are not exactly equal, so one of the tests is failing and now the whole step is failing. With that, we can be sure that our deployment pipeline will be fine, and with this one we can finally say that it is a CI/CD pipeline, so continuous integration and continuous deployment, and all of that working together, and it is a DevOps made good. I hope you liked this video, and it helped you to understand how to do things maybe a little bit better, and put some guardrails into your pipelines, DevOps pipelines. So enjoy!